Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Bite Size Nutrition Podcast. I'm Jillian, and today we are going to talk about how to stop eating when you're full, even if you're eating something really, really tasty. And I wanted to talk about this because I personally have very strong memories of sitting at my kitchen table as a kid, trying to come up with ways to convince my dad to let me leave the table. But until my plate was empty, I was not allowed to get up. And I've talked about this with a lot of the coaching clients that I've worked with over the years, that we learned from a very early age that we shouldn't waste food. We should finish what we're eating before we get dessert. There was a lot of bargaining around trying to get us to eat, quote unquote, like what was good for us. Often we got these crazy excuses like you need to finish your plate because there's starving kids in Africa. You need to finish your plate because then you can't have dessert, which I think we can think logically now, like, ooh, makes sense why I put dessert on a pedestal. But basically, it's completely understandable why we end up being adults who struggle to respect our body cues, who struggle to feel safe letting go of like, okay, I'm going to stop eating, right? We feel really uncomfortable with this idea of, oh, I can stop eating. I don't need to finish everything on my plate. I don't need to eat just because food is there, right? And when we were little, we had this innate ability to regulate our intake, our nutrition intake. But then we layered on different habits, our experience with our families. We maybe had food scarcity. There were food rules. There was fear mongering around food. And now we are adults who don't trust ourselves to respect our fullness, right? And that can be anything from you're out somewhere and you're not hungry but there's food and so you're like, "Ooh, well, I want to eat it." Or you're served a plate of food and it's way too much, but you finish it all anyways because you don't want to waste it, right? So we've essentially lost our ability to self-regulate our eating behavior, which is why we constantly turn to these external forms of control like diets, macro tracking, keeping food out of the house, or trying to volume eat to trick ourselves into feeling full for less calories. But the cool thing is we can relearn how to self-regulate our eating behavior. We can relearn how to trust our fullness, right? It is possible for us to relearn how to feel safe stopping even when there's still food in front of us. So let's talk about it. How do we do this? And when I work through this with coaching clients, we focus on two sides to this skill. So there's the physical side, so our ability to notice and interpret body sensations and signals, which is called interoception or interoceptive awareness. There's a podcast episode 140. I talk more about interoception and how to do that. But then there's the other side of feeling safe stopping when there's still food left, which is the mindset side, right? Which is all of those beliefs and thought patterns around fullness and around eating and around what we're supposed to do when it comes to food, right? And if you aren't aware of the sensation of fullness, or what I call comfy fullness, or if you struggle to recognize what comfy fullness feels like before that feeling of like, oh my gosh, I'm stuffed, I'm uncomfortable, then it's going to be really impossible for you to stop eating when you're comfortably full. But regardless, let's say you are able to notice when you're full, but you've got certain beliefs, you've got thoughts, you've got fears around food and eating that don't allow you to feel safe enough to stop when you're comfortably full, it's also going to be impossible, right? So as I said, episode 140 talks more about interoception. Episode 176, we talk about identifying hunger. And yes, if you want to stop eating when you are comfortably full, you must have some interoceptive awareness skills. However, this can be more challenging or less challenging for different people. I've worked with coaching clients that find it very, very hard to recognize when they're satisfied. And it takes a lot longer than other clients to recognize this skill. And so sometimes we need to just use our sort of best judgment and practice and experiment to get to the point where we actually feel confident with this skill. But a really big missing link is not just the ability to notice this physiologically, but actually the ability to stop before our plate is finished. And in my coaching program, I have an exercise that clients walk themselves through. It's a piece of curriculum that is basically like reflection questions and helps them sort of draw conclusions as to, oh, this makes sense. This is, wow, I had no idea that me not being able to stop when I was full, like they thought it was willpower or they thought it was self-control, and it's not, right? And specifically, because the exercise that I provide to clients inside my coaching program is on barriers to stopping at comfy fullness, right? So we look at what is actually keeping you from being able to do this. And mostly on the mindset side, because we do a lot of mindful eating work around the interoceptive awareness side, on giving yourself, enough space to notice like what that feels like. We do some tools or we do some exercises around actually being able to feel the feeling of comfy fullness versus over fullness. But a lot of the beliefs that we have around food, so on the mindset side, a lot of the beliefs that tend to come up are, leaving food on my plate is wasteful. I have to finish everything before I can have dessert. This is how much I'm supposed to eat. This food is so good. I don't know when I'll get to eat this again. Maybe when sharing food with others, you're like, I need to get my money's worth. And maybe some of these resonate with you because maybe you are aware of, oh, I'm full now. But these thoughts of like, I have to finish it all before I can eat dessert, or let's say you're a macro tracker and you're like, this is how much I'm supposed to eat. Those thoughts can drive you to continue eating. Those thoughts can take away from the feeling of, oh, it's safe for me to stop eating when I'm full, right? So a big part of building the skill of stopping at comfy fullness is bringing awareness to and addressing these thoughts. Because, like I said, we want to be able to feel safe that if I stop eating when I'm comfortably full, I can eat more later. I'm not going to miss out. I'm not doing anything wrong, right? And there are a few reasons why it might not feel safe. So, for example, I've worked with clients who maybe grew up poor, or they grew up in a household where they couldn't afford certain foods, right? And so I remember working with a client not so long ago that, for example, it was really hard for her to stop eating when she was full, especially around things like chocolate, because it was just something that she didn't have as much of growing up. It was like when they had the money to buy chocolate, they would eat it all, and it makes sense why it doesn't feel safe not eating all of the chocolate at once now as an adult. There may also have been some type of food scarcity imposed on you, not because of like economic standing, but because, for example, you parents put you on a diet, or you put yourself on a diet. You've dieted over and over and over. And so you feel this scarcity of like, oh my gosh, I never get to eat these foods. But it's because you've imposed that scarcity upon yourself. Dysregulated emotions can also drive these feelings of like, it's not safe for me to stop eating when I'm full. It often feels more safe to continue eating than it does to stop eating and then have to address emotions. And I want to give you an example of how this can show up that with a lot of the clients that I work with. So I tend to work with a lot of clients that have dieted or followed macros and things like that pretty strictly, and it's been challenging. And so let's say you stick to a strict macro plan all week long. You're right on point with your macros, but you know that your Saturdays are a day that you usually have different plans. You maybe go out to eat, there's different food options around. And it probably doesn't feel safe for you to stop eating comfy fullness when Saturday is the only day you allow yourself more variety or flexibility in your diet, right? Similarly, I had a client who was very strict with their eating sort of during the week. Everything was very well planned out. And on the weekends, there was a lot of family events and there was a lot of like snacky type food. And it didn't feel safe to stop when she was comfortably full because it was like, well, I only get to eat the stuff on the weekends, right? And so I want you to pause for a second and think about like, are there any recurring thoughts that I have or beliefs that I hold that might make it hard for me to stop eating when I'm comfortably full, right? So maybe it's like, I only get to eat this on the weekends. I don't know when I'll get more of this. Like, this is a special food. I need to take advantage. Maybe it's like, I don't want this to run out. Maybe it's like, I'll make up for this tomorrow by, cutting carbs or whatever. And I want you to make a list of these thoughts or beliefs that make it feel unsafe to stop eating at comfy fullness. And I want you to ask yourself, where did these beliefs come from? And do they align with the person that I want to be now? Because maybe you're like, hey, I get it. Like I learned this from my parents. My parents were really big on like not doing having a lot of food waste. And now you think like, okay, I'd like to still be someone who doesn't waste food, but can you be someone who doesn't waste food without using your body as sort of like a waste recipient, right? Because when we're overeating because we don't want to waste food, like that food still goes to waste. We're just kind of making ourselves suffer because of it. So I'd really encourage you to kind of examine some of those beliefs, right? And then I want you to consider, and this is where, if you're like, this is where we do a lot of our work in coaching, right? Is how do we create more of a sense of safety around stopping eating? I want to give you some examples of how we do this in coaching. So one of the strategies we'll often use in coaching is something called food habituation, which is where we strategically practice eating foods that it used to feel really hard to stop eating them until like they were gone or until you were stuffed. And we practice eating them in a mindful way and in an intentional way to challenge this belief of I never get to eat this, or once this is gone I won't get any more. And there's a few clients that we've recently worked on this, and they found like they can now keep certain foods at home and feel really calm around them and stop eating when they're comfortably full because they've actually practiced eating these foods in a mindful way and challenging this belief of this is like a special food or I never get to eat this. Another way that we do this in coaching is through practicing savoring. So savoring is a mindful eating skill, and it's where you really notice the tastes and the textures and the experience of eating, and you essentially savor the moment. You savor the food, you savor the experience, and it can help a lot with this like I have to eat it all to enjoy it fully belief. So we find that when clients perhaps focus on like one meal or snack a day to really savor the meal or the snack, they're actually more satisfied with less food most of the time, in part because as you pay attention to the tastes and textures and experience of eating, it does tend to sort of diminish in pleasantness as you continue eating, right? Often we mentally get in the mindset of like the last bite is the best bite. But when we actually savor our food, it's like, oh, the first bite is the best bite, right? And then another way that we do this is through choice point decision making. And this is in aligning your choices with what moves you closer to your values rather than relying on like old beliefs to drive behavior. So for example, you might say, hey, I don't love wasting food, but I value self-respect, and an action or a choice that aligns with self-respect is maybe saving this food, like putting it away, and if I'm hungry later, I'll eat more of it later, right? Rather than, no, I have to finish it just because it's in front of me. And so if you want to start trusting yourself to stop eating when you're full, I want to give you a couple takeaways. You probably need to work on either one or both. So that is either interoceptive awareness, so the ability to actually sense when you're comfortably full, or mindset, so the beliefs around fullness and stopping when you're full, or both. It's probably likely it's a little bit of both. And ultimately, the key to stopping eating when you're comfortably full is not willpower. It sometimes does take a little bit of like, oh, I'm making a tough decision, right? Because sometimes we're really full, you're eating something that's really delicious, and you kind of have to choose like what aligns more with my values right now, like feeling physically comfortable or enjoying this food. And you can make the mindful choice to eat past fullness. Like even mindful eaters still overeat sometimes. The difference is it becomes a choice, not sort of like a compulsive thing that we don't really have ownership over, right? And the powerful part is when we are able to create ownership over those choices of like, hey, I recognize I'm feeling comfortably full. I get to choose whether I stop eating or whether I continue eating. And that choice is not like heavily laden with fear or shame or guilt, right? That's where we want to get to. Specifically, if you want to practice the choice point, which is one of the tools that I mentioned in coaching, you can sign up for the self-trust starter kit. We talk about the choice point and how to use it in that 5-day mini course. It's totally free. If you would like to chat with me about how we can work together and how I can support you, you can find that in the show notes. If you enjoyed this episode, definitely go ahead and share it with someone that you think might need to hear this. Let me know how you liked it. And I will see you again here next time for another episode of the Bite Size Nutrition Podcast.